Hi, I'm Uncle Dave Lewis, and welcome to A Tale of Two Dardanellas. Now, the Dardanelles is actually a strait that runs off the coast of Turkey, separates Europe from Central Asia, and it is no doubt the inspiration for our song, which was written by a fellow named Johnny Black, who was a vaudeville entertainer and violinist who spent most of his life and died in Hamilton, Ohio, which is a stone's throw from where I'm sitting. Well, not really a stone's throw, but close. And Johnny Black wrote Dardanella and sold it to a fast-talking New York songwriter for $25, and it made millions. Now, Johnny Black was able to get some of that money back in the courts, but not a lot of it. Nevertheless, he had another big song called Paper Doll, which became a hit for the Mills Brothers, also local guys, long after Johnny Black died in 1936. He was beaten to death in the parking lot of the nightclub that he ran in Hamilton. Bummer. Anyway, this story is not so much about Johnny Black as it is about the song Dardanella and two of its earliest recordings. This one, by Ben Selvin's Novelty Orchestra, can you see that? Sort of. Was made in November 1919, and it is said to have sold 5 million copies. I don't believe that. I didn't even find my first copy of this until about the year 2000, and I had by that time been collecting records for 30 years. However, I do believe that it sold well, and RCA Victor gave Ben Selvin a gold record for it at one point, years after the fact, which would signify at least 500,000 copies. I think that one of the reasons it was so popular was that it looked forward to the kinds of grooves that Paul Whiteman would introduce later in the year on records. To some extent, they were already there in Selvin's orchestra of that time. Which brings us to the big question: who was Selvin's orchestra of that time? Well, according to the Big Rust book, and I don't seem to have it handy. I had it the first 3 times I tried to do this video. This would have been a band featuring Selvin on violin, a second unknown violinist, Nathan Glantz on alto saxophone, and his brother on trumpet, Ephraim Hannaford on trombone, and a fella whose name I didn't really recognize on xylophone, and basically little-known players. So, here we go with the November 1919 Dardanella, which incidentally was released in February 1920. Very much a violin melody. So, yeah, I remember the name of the xylophonist. Somebody named Frank Clegg is supposed to be the xylophone, according to Rust. One thing that Rust didn't know or didn't take into account, and he was in touch with Ben Selvin when he compiled those lists, that Ben Selvin got his start as a band leader leading an Earl Fuller unit. Earl Fuller was a band leader from Ohio who innovated the concept of being a single band leader who controlled several bands that went out and played different jobs, consisted of different combinations of musicians, yet they played the same book. Other guys who used this strategy were Sam Lannon and his younger brother Lester Lannon, up until just recently. It was a very profitable way to lead a band, was to in fact lead many bands and develop enough of a reputation that you could send any old band out there. They didn't necessarily expect to see you at the gig and have them play the music, and then you could be in 4 or 5 places at the same time, at least musically. Sam Lannon got Ben Selvin got his start leading a Earl Fuller unit, which put him into contact with musicians like Harry Raderman, George Hamilton Green, and other people that played with Earl Fuller. Well, I can tell you on that record, that's definitely not Ephraim Hannaford on the trombone. It's Harry Raderman. And we will prove that in a moment. I also believe that Frank Clegg might not be the xylophonist, that it may be Green, George Hamilton Green instead. Kind of on the fence about whether or not this is Nathan Glantz. It could be, although Rudy Wiedoeft is another possibility, at least to my ear. Now, let's move. This is a rough ride, so hold on to your hats, folks. This record, I got it at Whistling Willie's a couple weeks ago, and it has definitely seen better days. It is an Emerson of Dardanella. Am I showing you the... Yes, I am. The Dardanella side. Credited to the Plantation Jazz Orchestra, and it was also made in November of 1919. And the flip side is Make That Trombone Laugh And needless to say, Harry Raderman is obviously on it and very prominent, and I believe that this is what led Rust to conclude that the Plantation Jazz Orchestra was really Harry Raderman's orchestra with Benny Kruger on alto saxophone. And as I say, this record really is a challenge. So bear with me. And of course the swish calms down once it gets past any music. Okay. Now, alright. I believe that's the same band, but this is credited, as I say, to the Plantation Jazz Orchestra and credited in Rust to Harry Raderman. Well, Harry Raderman is certainly present, and he is present on the Selvin's Novelty Orchestra recording as well, and he's not supposed to be there. But same exact trombone breaks on both records. I do believe that the trumpet player is different. We do not have a second violin. We do not have the xylophone this time, so George Hamilton Green or Frank Clegg, neither one of them were around. However, I think this is a Selvin record, not a Harry Raderman record. One further little bit of proof is the matrix numbers themselves for Emerson. What we just heard was master 4886, Dardanella. 4885 is the flip side, make that trombone laugh. 4887, moving ahead, is In Shadowland, and 4888 is Yellow Dog Blues. And both of those are credited on the original labels to Selvin. So, maybe Raderman led the Plantation Jazz Band later. Who knows? But I suspect that both of these records are very early Ben Selvin records, despite what the labels say and despite what Russ says. Thank you for joining me. And yeah, does anybody really care about this stuff? Well, I guess I do. I'm Uncle Dave Lewis. Thanks for joining me.